Bright golden sunlight spills across the hospital entrance, catching the sharp lines of Dr. Malik Carter's navy scrubs and the quiet strength in his dark brown eyes. His tall, lean frame radiates a hard-earned confidence forged through years of saving lives. But today a storm of anger and disbelief flickers beneath his calm surface. The image captures his clenched jaw and the tight grip on his stethoscope, a symbol of his unshakable commitment to healing despite the pain of being judged by the color of his skin. The hospital's glass doors gleam with the last glow of the afternoon sun, while in the background a shadowy figure of the security guard looms, his face twisted with the smug certainty of prejudice. Malik's expression holds both the hurt of betrayal and the fiery resolve of justice about to be served. As the golden light promises a reckoning as inevitable as dawn itself, they said hospitals were sanctuaries of healing. Malik Carter discovered instead that even the sterile scent of antiseptic could not scrub away the stench of hatred. The first blow came not with words, but with a shove so violent his shoulder cracked against the metal frame of the emergency doors. A half-empty cup of coffee tumbled from his hand, scattering a dark stain across the pristine tiles as if the building itself bled. Malik staggered, but did not fall. He caught the railing, eyes locking with the man who had dared to lay hands on him. The security guard's uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming in the late afternoon light, but his sneer carried the rot of something far older and far uglier than authority. "You don't belong here," the guard hissed, low enough that only Malik could hear. Malik's throat burned with 100 retorts, but his training steadied him. He took a single breath, the kind he coached his patients through before an injection, and straightened. "I am Dr. Carter," he said evenly, though the ache in his shoulder pulsed like a drumbeat. "And this is my hospital." The guard's eyes narrowed, as if Malik's very existence were an insult. "You think a white coat makes you any different? I know what you people are like." He stepped closer, invading the doctor's space, the sour tang of his breath mixing with the antiseptic air. A nurse rounding the corner froze, her tray of charts trembling. Her mouth opened, then closed. Malik saw the fear flash across her face, not fear of him, but of the confrontation unraveling before her. He had seen it before, the silent calculation of bystanders weighing risk against righteousness. The guard's voice rose. "Answer me when I talk to you." His hand shot forward, fingers digging into Malik's arm. Pain flared, sharp and hot. Malik pulled back instinctively, the years of martial arts he'd once practiced whispering in his muscles. But he did not strike. He would not give this man that satisfaction. Instead, Malik spoke with the precision of a scalpel. "Remove your hand. Now." Something flickered in the guard's eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps rage at a black man daring to command. He shoved harder. Malik's back hit the wall, the stethoscope digging painfully into his chest. The nurse gasped. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in an indifferent rhythm. Malik tasted blood where he'd bitten his tongue. His mind raced, not just through the shock of pain, but through every headline, every story of men who looked like him meeting bullets or batons for less. He thought of his patients, who trusted him to show up, unbroken. And then, like the sudden clarity before a critical incision, he knew exactly what to do. "Let go," he said, his voice carrying the weight of the operating theater, the authority of someone who had literally held hearts in his hands. The nurse stepped forward now, trembling but firm. "He's a doctor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't." But the guard released him only when the sharp click of approaching heels announced another presence. The chief administrator, Ms. Hernandez, appeared, her sharp suit catching the golden light like a blade. She took in the scene, the guard's grip, Malik's bruised arm, the silent nurse with a single glance. Her face hardened. "What is happening here?" she demanded. The guard straightened, the bravado draining from his posture as quickly as it had flared. "This man was trespassing," he began, but Ms. Hernandez cut him off with a raised hand. "This man," she said, her tone slicing through the corridor, "is one of the finest surgeons in this city. And you," she turned to the guard, her voice cold, "are one breath away from losing your job and your freedom." Malik inhaled slowly, his heart pounding. He wanted to speak, to name the humiliation, but the words tangled with the ache in his chest. Instead, he simply met the guard's gaze. For the first time, he saw uncertainty there, a crack in the armor of hatred. But Malik knew this was only the beginning. Bruises would fade. Injustice demanded something more permanent. That night, as the city's skyline blazed with golden dusk, Malik sat at his kitchen table, the hospital's report glowing on his tablet. He replayed every second, the shove, the words, the silence of witnesses. He thought of the young black interns who looked to him for proof that hard work could overcome anything. He thought of the patients who believed in his steady hands. And he thought of the guard, whose face had been twisted with a certainty that skin color defined worth. Justice, Malik decided, would not be an act of revenge. It would be a lesson. He picked up his phone and dialed. "This is Dr. Malik Carter," he said when the detective answered. His voice was steady, the same voice he used when delivering a life-saving diagnosis. "I'm ready to file charges." The detective's silence stretched, then came the quiet acknowledgement. "We'll take your statement tonight." Malik ended the call and leaned back, the golden light of sunset pooling across his living room like a promise. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since the assault, he felt something stronger than pain. He felt purpose. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent yet alive, as if bearing witness. The path ahead would be long, tangled with hearings and headlines, but Malik Carter was no stranger to long fights. He had stitched together broken bodies. Now, he would help stitch a fractured justice. Malik barely slept. Each time his eyelids grew heavy, the memory of the guard's shove jolted him awake, the echo of hatred ringing louder than any hospital alarm. By dawn, his apartment was awash in the faintest streaks of gold, the city outside still yawning into morning. He brewed coffee with hands steadier than he expected. Purpose steadied him. Justice demanded his full attention. At the precinct, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like distant insects. Detective Alvarez, a woman in her early 40s with eyes that carried both weariness and quiet fire, slid a digital recorder across the table. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice low and even. Malik spoke, recounting each detail with the precision of a surgeon dictating an operative note. The shove, the grip, the words that cut deeper than the bruise. He described the nurse's trembling hesitation, the cold shock in the administrator's face. He even described the moment he chose restraint, the split second when he refused to strike back. Alvarez nodded occasionally, her pen gliding. "You've given us a clear case of assault," she said finally. "And with the witness statements we'll gather, there's enough to pursue charges." She hesitated, then leaned forward. "Dr. Carter, are you prepared for the attention this will bring? It won't stay quiet. Not with a respected surgeon pressing charges against a hospital security guard." Malik met her gaze. "I didn't become a doctor to stay quiet," he said. "And I won't stay quiet when someone believes my life, my work, my very presence is worth less than theirs because of my skin." The detective studied him for a long beat before offering a small, firm nod. "Then we'll make sure your voice is heard." By midday, the story was already spilling beyond the hospital walls. A junior reporter from the local paper called for comment. Malik declined, but he knew it was only the beginning. Social media had turned whispers into a storm. Colleagues sent texts, some supportive, some nervous. At the hospital, Ms. Hernandez called an emergency staff meeting. Malik attended, his shoulder aching beneath the weight of curious glances. "This institution," Hernandez said, her voice like tempered steel, "stands against discrimination in all forms. The incident yesterday is under full investigation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Malik caught the eye of the nurse who had witnessed the assault. She offered a small, brave nod. He returned it, silently grateful. When the meeting adjourned, Malik found himself cornered by Dr. Nguyen, an older surgeon known for his cautious diplomacy. "Malik," Nguyen said quietly, "you're doing the right thing. But be careful. These cases, they bring out the worst in people." Malik managed a tired smile. "I've already seen the worst," he replied. That evening, a call came from the hospital board. They wanted a statement, something measured, something that would show solidarity without igniting further controversy. Malik listened, then said with unshakable calm, "The truth doesn't need to be measured. It needs to be heard." The next day brought the first sign that the guard's confidence had cracked. Through his attorney, the man whose name Malik now knew was Daniel Ross, issued a brief statement denying wrongdoing but admitting to a misunderstanding. The word echoed like a mockery. Malik remembered the sneer, the grip on his arm. Misunderstanding was too small a word to contain the centuries of weight behind that act. Alvarez called with an update. We've interviewed the nurse and Ms. Hernandez. Their statements are consistent with yours. We're moving forward with the assault charge. The district attorney is supportive. Malik thanked her, though gratitude felt too simple for the complex mix of resolve and sorrow twisting in his chest. He had wanted justice, but now that it was coming, he felt the burden of Ida weight both heavy and necessary. 2 days later, when the charge became public, the hospital lobby transformed into a stage. Cameras flashed. Reporters called his name. Malik walked through them with measured steps, his white coat a silent declaration of who he was beyond the color of his skin. He did not stop to answer questions. The golden morning light bathed the marble floor, turning each step into something almost ceremonial. Inside, patients watched him pass with quiet respect. A young black mother with a child in her arms whispered, "Thank you," as he walked by. He paused just long enough to meet her eyes and nod. That simple exchange held more power than any headline. Ross was arraigned the following week. Malik sat in the courtroom, the air thick with the scent of old wood and unspoken tension. Ross entered wearing a suit that could not soften the hardness of his jaw. For the first time since the assault, Malik studied him without anger. He saw not a monster, but a man shaped by fears he had never confronted, a man who had mistaken prejudice for strength. The judge read the charges. Ross's attorney entered a plea of not guilty. Malik's pulse quickened, but he held himself steady. This was not about vengeance. This was about something larger, something that reached beyond two men and into the heart of a community that needed to see accountability. Outside the courthouse, microphones waited. Malik finally spoke. "This is not just my fight," he said, his voice clear above the murmurs. "This is about every person who has ever been told, silently or violently, that they do not belong. We all belong, and we will not be silent." His words traveled faster than he imagined. By nightfall, they were replayed across news broadcasts, quoted in editorials, shared in classrooms. Malik returned home to find his inbox flooded with messages, patients, strangers, colleagues offering thanks, sharing their own stories of quiet wounds and unseen battles. He read each one, the golden evening light soft on his face, and felt something shift. Justice was not a single verdict. It was a chorus of voices refusing to be diminished. And Malik knew, with a clarity as precise as a surgeon's cut, that this was only the beginning of the healing. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of hospital shifts and court dates. Each morning Malik arrived at the operating theater before dawn, his hands performing their precise ballet of incisions and sutures while his mind wrestled with the coming trial. The hospital corridors no longer felt like neutral ground. Some colleagues greeted him with quiet admiration. Others avoided his eyes, their polite smiles hiding discomfort. One evening, after a 12-hour surgery that left his shoulders aching and his mind heavy, Malik found an envelope slipped beneath his office door. No name, just a folded sheet of paper. The handwriting inside was uneven, almost hesitant. "I saw what happened. I'm sorry I didn't step in. I'm willing to testify if needed." It was signed only with a single initial R. Malik read the note twice, then closed his eyes. The nurse who had witnessed the assault had already given a statement. But this was a quiet confession from another witness, someone who had been frozen by fear and now sought redemption. He felt no anger at the delay. He understood how fear could paralyze. What mattered was that the silence had been broken. Detective Alvarez was cautiously pleased when he handed her the note. "Every additional witness strengthens the case," she said. "Sometimes courage takes time to find its voice." Meanwhile, Ross's defense grew more combative. His attorney painted a picture of a misunderstanding under pressure, a man doing his job who had misread a situation. But the hospital's internal investigation had uncovered security camera footage grainy, but unmistakable off the shove, the grip, the sneer. Alvarez called Malik late one night. "The footage seals it," she said. "We'll introduce it at trial. The jury will see exactly what you experienced." Malik listened in silence, the city lights flickering beyond his apartment window. He thought of his patients who had trusted him to fight for their lives. Now he was fighting for something far less tangible, but just as vital. On the morning of the trial, golden sunlight spilled through the courthouse windows, casting long beams across the polished floor. Malik sat at the witness stand, the wood smooth beneath his fingertips. The prosecutor guided him through his testimony. He spoke with the same measured calm he used when explaining a delicate procedure. The shove, the words, the pain that was more than physical. Ross sat across the room, his face taut. For the first time, Malik noticed the flicker of uncertainty in the man's eyes. Not fear exactly, something closer to a dawning recognition of the gravity of his actions. Cross-examination was sharper. Ross's attorney tried to unravel Malik's account, suggesting confusion, misinterpretation, even exaggeration. Malik met each question with the unflinching precision of a surgeon correcting a flawed diagnosis. "No," he said when the lawyer hinted that he might have misunderstood. "I know what I heard. I know how it felt when he shoved me." When the prosecutor played the security footage, the courtroom fell into a hush broken only by the soft whir of the projector. The grainy image showed the shove, the guard's sneer, Malik's controlled defiance. The silence that followed was heavy and unmistakable. Outside, reporters waited. Malik declined interviews, walking past the microphones with quiet dignity. Justice, he believed, was not a spectacle but a slow, deliberate act. That evening, alone in his apartment, he replayed the day's events in his mind. He remembered his mother's warning, that his achievements would never fully shield him. Yet he also felt her voice like a steadying hand reminding him that dignity was not granted by others, it was claimed. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Malik returned to the hospital, performing surgeries, checking on recovering patients. In the operating room, life and death offered their own sharp clarity. Whatever the verdict, he knew his path remained the same: to heal, to teach, to fight for the humanity of every patient who entered his care. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom was crowded, the golden afternoon light slanting through tall windows. The foreperson stood, paper trembling slightly. "Guilty," she said, assault in the second degree. A ripple of reaction swept the room. A gasp here, a murmured sigh there. Ross closed his eyes. His shoulders slumped, the defiance draining like air from a punctured lung. Malik felt no triumph, only a quiet release, as if a taut string inside him had finally eased. Justice was never about humiliation. It was about recognition, about drawing a line and saying this is not acceptable. Outside the courthouse, microphones awaited again. This time Malik paused. "This verdict is not the end of a story," he said, voice carrying across the crowd. "It is a beginning, a reminder that silence feeds injustice, and that every voice raised against hatred matters." His words traveled quickly, echoing through news broadcasts and social feeds. But what mattered more were the private messages. A young medical student who wrote, "You gave me courage to stay in school." A father who said, "My son asked why people judge by skin color. Today I could tell him justice still exists." Weeks later, Malik stood once more at the hospital entrance where it had all begun. The same golden light bathed the glass doors. Patients passed, staff hurried by, and the world moved forward. He touched the railing where he had steadied himself that first day. He felt the weight of what had changed not only in the courtroom, but within himself. Hatred had struck, but it had not defined him. Justice had spoken, but more than that, humanity had answered. Malik turned and walked inside, ready for another day of healing. The work was never finished, but neither was hope. The golden light followed him down the corridor, a quiet testament to the truth he now carried. Dignity is not something granted. It is something lived. Months passed. The hospital's routines resumed their quiet rhythm, but Malik sensed an undercurrent of change. Diversity training sessions were no longer an afterthought. They became mandatory, and not the bland slideshows of the past. Staff meetings now included real conversations, messy, uncomfortable, necessary, about bias and the responsibility to confront it. Malik had not sought fame, but letters poured in from across the country. Some were from fellow physicians who had endured their own silent battles. Others came from parents who thanked him for giving their children a story of resilience. He kept the letters in a drawer of his office, not as trophies, but as reminders of why he had chosen this fight. One evening, long after his last surgery, he found a small envelope waiting on his desk. The handwriting was careful and unfamiliar. Inside, a single sheet of paper carried words that stopped him. "Dr. Carter, I was wrong. I judged you before I knew you, before I even knew myself. I am sorry." It was signed simply, Daniel Ross. Malik read the note twice, the hospital's nighttime quiet surrounding him. He felt no surge of victory, only a slow, deep exhale, as if something long clenched in his chest had finally eased. Detective Alvarez called a week later. Ross has agreed to speak publicly, she said. He wants to participate in a community forum about racial bias. He asked if you would stand with him. Malik's first instinct was hesitation. The memory of the shove, the sting of those words, still lived in the back of his mind. But another memory followed. His mother's voice, telling him that healing was more than just a sight, was the courage to see even an enemy as human. The forum was held in a sunlit community center with tall windows that turned the late afternoon into a wash of gold. Chairs were arranged in a circle, no podiums, no distance. People from every walk of life filled the room: hospital staff, neighborhood residents, students. Ross stood when introduced. He wore no uniform, just a plain shirt and the look of a man who had shed the armor of denial. His voice trembled as he spoke. I grew up thinking certain things without questioning them. That day at the hospital, I acted out of fear and ignorance. I hurt someone who was there to help others. I can't undo it, but I can face it. The room was silent except for the steady hum of the air conditioning. Malik listened, his heartbeat steady, the old bruise on his shoulder a distant echo. When it was his turn, he stood, the golden light catching the edges of his white coat. I am a doctor, he said quietly. But healing is not just about medicine. It is about truth. That day I was hurt not only in body, but in spirit. Yet here we are. We cannot rewrite what happened, but we can write what comes next. Healing is a choice we make together. Someone in the audience began to clap, then another. Soon the room filled with a quiet, rising applause, not the roar of spectacle, but the steady rhythm of acknowledgement. Afterward, as the crowd thinned and the sun dipped lower, Ross approached. He held out his hand. Malik looked at it for a long moment, then took it. The handshake was firm, not of friendship yet, but of understanding. Outside, the sky burned with streaks of amber and gold. Malik stepped into the evening, the last rays catching the hospital's windows in a glow that mirrored the forum's quiet triumph. He felt the weight of the journey behind him, the shock of violence, the long march through justice, the slow, difficult work of reconciliation. This was the ending he had never imagined, not a verdict alone, but a beginning. The fight against prejudice would never be finished, but something inside him had shifted. Justice had spoken, and so had grace. As Malik walked toward his car, a cool breeze lifted the edge of his coat. He thought of the patients waiting for him tomorrow, of the students who would carry these lessons forward. The golden light lingered on the horizon, a silent promise that dignity and hope would always outlast hatred. Malik Carter drove into the night with the quiet certainty that his work both as a healer and as a witness had only just begun. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.